They were just two grandparents on a quiet drive in 1984. Then they vanished without a trace. 16 years later, their rusted car surfaced in a junkyard, and what was sealed inside changed everything. It was supposed to be the trip of a lifetime. On May 17, 1984, Russell and Edith Harrow, both in their early 70s, pulled out of their quiet suburban driveway in Billings, Montana, just after dawn. Their pale blue 1978 Ford LTD was packed carefully. Snacks, maps, binoculars, and Russell's handwritten list of scenic stops across 4 states. They were headed south to Zion Bryce and the Grand Canyon. They'd seen these wonders in their youth, but never as retirees. Now that their children were grown and gone, and the world had slowed down, this was their moment to see it all one. Last time, their neighbor Donna Fisher waved them off from her porch with a smile. "Bring me back a rock," she joked, sipping her coffee. Russell, grinning, lifted a paper bag in return. "Packed you one already," he said. That was the last anyone ever saw of them. 3 weeks later, their son Gerald filed a missing persons report. The couple had failed to arrive at a family cabin in Arizona, their final stop before returning home. No one had heard from them since a postcard sent from a gas station in Ely, Nevada, postmarked May 21st. The postcard was brief and cheerful. "Weather's lovely, but it says, 'I'm driving too slow. Love you. See you soon, Dad.'" But they were never seen again at first. Authorities treated it like a simple case of a car accident in a remote region. Nevada was vast and empty, its highways long and lonely. Searches were conducted from the air. Old mining roads were scouted. Rangers combed the desert fringe. Nothing. No tire tracks, no debris, no witnesses. The car didn't turn up in a ravine or abandoned by the side of the road. There was no bank activity, no motel check-ins, no fingerprints in the National Crime Database. The Harrows had simply evaporated. By 1985, the search effort had slowed to a trickle. The Harrows became a quiet file folder in a dusty cabinet in a regional sheriff's office. Occasionally, a gas station attendant would claim to have seen a car like theirs or a man who looked like Russell, but each tip withered under scrutiny. The children tried to move on. Gerald sold the house in Billings. Edith's daughter from a previous marriage, Carol, placed a bench in the local park with their names engraved. Time passed, and then more of it. 6 years later, the Harrows case was largely forgotten until in Nevada. Highway worker found something odd while clearing brush near a defunct rest stop outside Ely. It was a pair of dusty thermoses, identical to the ones the Harrows had owned. But when detectives followed up, they found nothing else near Beano car, no prints. The thermoses could have belonged to anyone. The find was filed away without ceremony. Then everything changed. In 2000, a small, declining desert town outside Barstow, California, a junkyard went up for auction. The property had belonged to a man named Melvin Clay, notorious hoarder and eccentric who died without a will, and the county had taken possession. The junkyard was a maze of rusted metal, busted signs, and broken-down cars stacked 3 high. But behind the main lot, sealed off in a large corrugated storage shed hidden behind tarps, crates, and what looked like old fridge doors. One of the new owners found something strange. A car. It was a 1978 Ford Limited, pale blue license plate, MT748G. The interior was intact, dusty, sealed. The doors were locked, the windows fogged. Under the passenger seat was a small brown paper bag, its faded writing still legible, for Donna from the road. The discovery sparked a firestorm. Sheriff's deputies were called in, photos were taken. The vehicle matched every known detail of the Harrows' missing car, but the couple was not inside. No blood, no fingerprints, no bodies, no sign of struggles, just a perfectly preserved relic tucked away in a remote corner of a forgotten junkyard. 800 miles from their last known location. How did it get there? Who had moved it? And why? Most importantly, what happened to Russell and Edith Harrow? Back in Montana, Gerald sat silent across from the investigator who delivered the news. He clutched the photo of the bag found under the seat. His hands trembled. "Why would someone save the car?" he whispered. "But not them?" At the junkyard, The vehicle was lifted from the shed and hauled to a forensic lab in Bakersfield. The body of the car showed no signs of a crash, no forceful entry. But as specialists worked beneath the chassis, they found something odd. A reinforced steel plate welded under the driver's side, homemade, and behind the glove compartment. A gap where something had been removed. The detectives now had more questions than answers. Who was Melvin Clay? Really? Why had he gone to such lengths to preserve a car he never registered or used? Why hide it behind layers of junk in a private shed? Did he kill the Harrows? Or had someone else done it? And Melvin just took the car. 16 years after two grandparents vanished on a scenic road trip, the only trace of them resurfaced in a place they never planned to go. But someone had planned it. The deeper they looked, the stranger the truth became. The forensic team at the Bakersfield County Crime Lab treated the Harrows Ford Limited like a time capsule. It was, in every sense, frozen in the past. The car was dusty, sun-bleached in spots, and the tires were flat, but the interior was untouched. Pristine, as if someone had sealed it to be opened decades later. Edith's knitting sat in the back seat, a small blue ball of yarn still wound on her needles, as if she'd just stepped out for a moment. The glove box contained a torn map with circled rest stops from Utah to Arizona. Her prescription sunglasses were folded neatly in the center console. There was no sign of panic, no rushed departure, but it was the underside of the car that raised alarms. That steel plate, homemade and welded crudely, had no legitimate reason to be there. It wasn't structural reinforcement. It looked like a modification, something added aftermarket, possibly to hide or protect something. But it had been scraped clean, no prints, no residue, no writing. More unnerving still, inside the engine compartment, the battery and distributor cap were missing. Not stolen, but removed carefully, deliberately. It was as if the car had been disabled, intentionally preserved in a non-operational state. Whoever hid this vehicle didn't want it to run, but they didn't want it destroyed either. The car wasn't abandoned. It was curated. Detective Olivia. Marks from the Mojave County Sheriff's Department had been pulled onto the case 3 days after the car's discovery. She wasn't even born when the Harrows vanished. But there was something about the details that got under her skin. First question was simple. Who the hell was Melvin Clay? The answer wasn't straightforward. Melvin had inherited the junkyard from his father in the 1970s. Locals remembered him as odd but not dangerous, reclusive, a mechanic turned scrap collector, never married, no children. Lived in a trailer behind the yard, surrounded by dogs and silence. But what caught Olivia's attention was a newspaper clipping found in Melvin's old trailer, dated May 1984. It was an article about senior couples traveling America in their golden years. A small segment quoted a couple from Montana, Russell and Edith Harrow, who spoke briefly about their upcoming trip. Someone had underlined their names and circled them. The newspaper had no fingerprints, but it wasn't the kind of thing most folks would keep, unless it meant something to them. Olivia pressed harder. She tracked down Melvin's only known relative, his estranged cousin, Harold Clay. Living in Yuma, he hadn't spoken to Melvin in over a decade, but agreed to talk. Melvin never killed nobody, Harold insisted, leaning back in his worn-out recliner. But he had obsessions. He collected things, not just junk. He kept ledgers, boxes of notes. Sometimes I'd go by and he'd be sitting there cataloging. License plates he'd seen that week. Olivia leaned forward. License plates. Yep, Harold said. Said he could tell what kind of person someone was by what they drove. Talked about rescuing vehicles from the system, said some. Cars were meant to be kept, not crushed. What about people? Olivia asked. Harold's face darkened. Melvin didn't talk about people. Back at the department, Olivia requested Melvin's auction storage records and personal effects. Among them was a worn, spiral-bound notebook titled Vehicles Worth Saving. The list was long, hundreds of entries, some with notes like, seen on I-15, taillight cracked or man yelled at wife. But one entry, dated May 1984, read, Montana plates mount 748G, pale blue Ford, eastbound elderly couple, stopped at pump number 3. She smiled. He paid in cash. worth keeping. It chilled Olivia. This wasn't a coincidence. Melvin had seen them. He'd followed them. And if he didn't kill them, then he at least knew what had happened. But Melvin was dead. No confession. No journal entry admitting guilt. Just cryptic language and quiet actions. Gerald Harrow, now in his 60s, flew to California after Olivia's call. He stood silently beside the car as officers briefed him. His eyes filled with tears when they opened the trunk and found his father's weathered journal tucked beside a rusted jack. He flipped it open with trembling fingers. On the inside cover was a Polaroid of Russell and Edith from the 1970s, sitting on a cabin porch, smiling. Gerald didn't speak for a long time. Then he asked quietly, what else was in the shed? Olivia hesitated. There had been something else, not just the car. Behind a broken refrigerator, sealed in a plastic storage bin, was a pair of orthopedic shoes, woman size 7. Inside one, stuffed deep in the toe, was a roll of undeveloped film. The film was rushed to the lab. What developed made seasoned officers go silent. 8 photos, all from inside the junkyard. A pale blue car, a red light in the distance, a figure. In silhouette and in one frame, dated May 24, 1984. Handwritten on the border was a man resembling Melvin holding something or someone in his hands. The image was blurry, but Edith's floral cardigan was unmistakable. She was alive when they got to the junkyard. The case was reopened in full, but if Melvin had accomplices, they were ghosts. There were no fingerprints, no DNA, no evidence of anyone else on the property. Still, Olivia believed something had happened. On that land in 1984, something beyond car theft or obsession. The couple didn't just vanish. They were chosen. By the end of summer, the Harrows' vehicle was transported to a secure evidence facility. But whispers about the case had already begun to spread online. Forums picked up the story. Viral. Threads speculated about the collector of lost travelers, tying the Harrows case to other unsolved senior disappearances from the 1980s. Olivia didn't want to believe in patterns, without proof. But as she rechecked missing persons logs from Nevada, Utah, and California between 1982 and 1986, she found 3 more cases that mirrored the Harrows. Elderly couples, scenic road trips, vanished without a trace. In 2 of those cases, the cars were never found. The Mojave County Records Office wasn't used to a rush of out-of-state detectives. But after word got out about the Harrow vehicle discovery, Olivia Marks wasn't alone in the archive stacks. FBI field agents from Los Angeles and Arizona started asking questions, quiet ones. At first, Olivia welcomed the help. But the more she shared, the more it felt like something was being pulled away from her. She wasn't just investigating a cold case anymore. She was staring at a potential serial abduction pattern, or worse, a network. And if her hunch was right, then Melvin Clay hadn't acted alone. She needed to go deeper. In the dusty archives of an old storage unit behind the sheriff's office, Olivia uncovered the original 1984 missing persons case file for Russell and Edith Harrow. It had all the markers of a rushed investigation. Initial report was filed by their eldest son, Gerald, on June 3rd. From a payphone near Barstow, parents never arrived. No contact. Unusual. The sheriff at the time had noted probably a wrong turn. They'll call by week's end. They never did. Inside the manila envelope were 2 blurry gas station surveillance photos, now faded. Edith stood near the pump. Russell had his hand on the car door. There was someone else, a man, possibly in overalls, standing in the shadows. No one had ever identified him. That gas station, the file said, was demolished in 1989. The film negatives were long gone. But Olivia spotted something that had been overlooked. A receipt from that day, May 24, 1984, to 17 p.m., for fuel, coffee, and a map. $8.45, paid in cash. The receipt had a handwritten note on the back in Edith's neat cursive. Next stop, roadside diner. Then the long haul to Flagstaff. That diner no longer existed, but a man named Pete Herrera, now in his 70s, claimed to have worked there. Back in the day, Olivia drove 5 hours to speak with him. Pete remembered the Harrows. They were sweet folks, real polite. I only remember them because we didn't get many travelers that early in the season, he said. Olivia leaned in. Do you remember who they were with? He frowned. With? You mean, do I recall them sitting with anyone, talking to anyone in the lot? He scratched his head. Well, I do remember a beat-up pickup that came in around. At the same time, some guy with a scruffy beard didn't eat. Just stood by the vending machine the whole time. Did he speak to them? Olivia asked. Pete's brow furrowed. Now that you say it, the old man, Russell, looked uncomfortable. When he saw him, maybe even knew him, I couldn't tell. Olivia's stomach dropped. Did he follow them out? Pete nodded slowly. Yeah, they left first. He tailed out about a minute later, same direction. It wasn't much, but it was something. A stranger following the Harrows, possibly Melvin. But if that man wasn't Melvin, then who was he? Back. In Mojave, Olivia asked for the old Junkyard visitor logs, if any existed. Surprisingly, they did. Melvin kept journals, sloppy ones, but detailed. One page from May 1984 was water-stained but legible. Montana couple. Blue Ford, map to Flagstaff, left alone for now. Then, 3 pages later, stored vehicle, secured. Woman disoriented, he refused help. Vehicle moved under night. What chilled Olivia wasn't just the content. It was the change in language. The first entry read like observation. The second like documentation of action. Melvin hadn't been a random scrap collector. He'd been orchestrating something, possibly drugging or at least separating the couple. But how? And who helped him? When Olivia brought this theory to her supervisor, she was told to stay in scope and focus on the car discovery only. But she ignored the warning. She called Gerald Harrow again. I think your parents were targeted, she said bluntly, and not just by Melvin Clay. Gerald went quiet. Then he asked, Did anyone ever search the caves north of Blythe? Olivia blinked. Why? My dad used to say, back when I was a kid, that if something ever went wrong on the road, he'd hide in the desert, follow riverbeds, find shelter underground. It was his backup plan. You think he tried to? Escape, if he had the chance, Gerald replied. Olivia filed a special request to do an aerial survey of the Blythe foothills. Old irrigation tunnels from the 1940s crisscrossed that area. Mostly forgotten, some collapsed, some not. The drone footage came back with thermal anomalies. One section, narrow, carved between 2 dry rock faces, showed a small rectangle of colder temperature than the surrounding terrain, unnaturally straight, possibly metal. She and a local search team hiked in, found it. A rusted hatch buried under 6 inches of sand and brush. No markings, just a loop handle and a padlock long rusted through. They pried it open. Inside was a tunnel, cramped, damp, lit only by their headlamps. The tunnel extended about 40 feet before opening into a small chamber. There were crates, old tarps, a camping chair, and on the wall, in chalk, faint but legible, R+E Harrow. 27th, 1984. He had made it. Russell had been alive 3 days after they vanished, and he had written that himself. But the real shock came when they opened one of the crates. Inside were 3 rolls of undeveloped film, a journal, and what looked like 2 weathered photos. IDs wrapped in plastic. One belonged to Edith Harrow. The other to a woman named Lorna Maddox, born 1939, reported missing in 1978. Back at the station, Olivia searched the database. Lorna Maddox was a case from Nevada, vanished during a camping trip with her husband. No vehicle was ever found. Her husband had claimed she wandered off into the desert and got lost. He was never charged. His name Lawrence Clay Melvin's older brother, a man who disappeared off the grid in the early 80s and was presumed dead. But Olivia now knew better. The Clay brothers weren't collecting junk. They were collecting people. The name Lawrence Clay changed everything. For Olivia Marks, this wasn't just a missing persons case anymore. It was the unraveling of a 20-year indie mystery layered in lies, shadows, and long-forgotten backroads. The moment she saw Lorna Maddox's faded ID, it connected dots that no one had even thought to draw. She sat alone in the evidence review room, the overhead light buzzing faintly. Before her lay the recovered contents from the Blythe Foothills hatch, each piece more unsettling than the last. A film roll. A torn photograph of Edith smiling in front of the Harrows Buick, time-stamped May 25, 1984. A manila envelope marked only with the initials LC, and, most hauntingly, a hand-drawn map showing a looping pattern of highways, back roads and fuel stops stretching from New Mexico to Southern California. Almost like someone had practiced this route over and over, Olivia had no access to federal files from Nevada, but she made a call anyway to a retired detective named Emery Holston, who'd once worked the Maddox case in Carson City. Holston remembered Lawrence Clay instantly. He was polite, maybe too polite, he said over the phone. Said his wife wandered off while he was fishing. Swore he searched for hours, but something was off. No signs of struggle. No personal items missing except a scarf and her ID. He passed the polygraph, but Holston paused. The man didn't cry once. Not even when we told him she was likely dead. Olivia hesitated. Did you ever find his vehicle? No, Holston replied. But now you're telling me something from her turned up in a hatch miles away from where she vanished? Yes, Olivia said. Holston's voice dropped, and I think we both missed something bigger. The theory began to solidify. Lawrence Clay vanished in 1982. Melvin Clay moved to Mojave in 1983. A year later, the Harrows disappeared. It wasn't just coincidence, it was a pattern. Olivia now believed the brothers were involved in more than just hiding a car. They were running something, a system, a trap, maybe even an underground route for abductions and cover-ups. The tunnel in Blythe wasn't a panic shelter. It was a weapon. As she dug deeper into property records, Olivia found a plot of land, purchased under a fake name in 1981, less than 60 miles from where the Harrows were last seen. The name on the deed, Edward Lell. It's an alias previously linked to a P.O. box that Melvin used in the late 80s. She requested a warrant. The land was mostly desert scrub scattered with mesquite and sagebrush, but the satellite image showed an old, sun-baked mobile home near the edge of the property, half sunk into the earth. She and 2 deputies drove out with a crowbar and masks. The structure was half collapsed. Rattlesnakes had taken up residence under the porch, but inside passed. The mold and the smell of rotten wood were more records journals. Dozens of them, each one dated, numbered. Some were dry and unreadable, others carefully preserved. She opened one journal, 14. July 1984. Russell grew suspicious. She trusted me, but he didn't. Had to split them. Told her we were going for help. Journal 18, October 1984. She asks about her husband every night. I say he ran. She doesn't believe it anymore. Journal 19, November 1984. She found the trapdoor, locked it tighter, burned the map. Olivia closed the book. This wasn't just abduction, it was long-term manipulation. Someone had kept Edith Harrow alive, possibly for months. Someone had separated her from her husband, possibly under the guise of help. But what haunted Olivia most was Journal 20. The handwriting was different, messier, rushed. A page near the center read, "He's gone, took the car, took the woman. Said he'd make it disappear. I didn't agree. He said we started this together. Now we end it the same. Signed L.C. Lawrence Clay. Wasn't dead." He'd passed the torch to Melvin. Back in town, Olivia turned her attention to the junkyard again. Specifically to a structure she'd previously ignored, a rusted storage shed near the back fence. It had been padlocked and dismissed by the first responders as containing nothing more than broken machinery. She asked to have it reopened. Inside, under a tarp, was an oil drum sealed with a welded lid. It took a blowtorch to open. Inside were bones and a locket. Inside were 2 photos. One of Edith, one of a young man Olivia didn't recognize. Tucked behind them, a torn piece of notebook paper scrolled in fading ink. They lied about the road. We were never meant to make it to Flagstaff. It was Edith's handwriting. She'd been alive long enough to write that message, long enough to be buried in secret. Olivia stepped outside, hands shaking. This was bigger than one couple, bigger than one junkyard. It was a silent graveyard across state lines, kept hidden by brothers who'd known how to vanish people without a trace. In the following days, Olivia compiled a full report. Over 20 cold cases across the Southwest showed similar patterns. Missing couples, stolen vehicles, vague sightings, no evidence. Each one with a small common thread: a rural detour, a truck stop, or a diner stop where someone, usually a man in overalls or a gas station clerk, had last been seen near the victims. She circled them on the map. They formed a route that snaked through New Mexico, Arizona, Nevada, and California, like an artery through the desert. Melvin's junkyard was just one organ in a dying system. But what mattered now, and what Olivia had to prove, was where it all began. Because there was one more journal entry in Journal 21, the final one. He told me he'd bury the Buick where no one would find it, said the door would be locked, the engine drained, and her memory forgotten, but I couldn't forget. She sang at night. Even after he said she was gone, I heard her voice. She never left that car. She never left me. Signed again, LC. And below that, a small penciled phrase: this ends where it began. 1962, Hollister. Hollister, a small farm town nearly forgotten, nestled in California's Central Valley, had no direct tie to any cold case. But when Olivia searched birth records from 1962, she found something chilling. A child born to Agnes Clay, no father. Listed, named Melvin L. Clay. And one line in the hospital notes: unusual attachment observed between mother's brother and infant son. Nurse requested transfer of care. Olivia's jaw tightened. This hadn't just been a series of crimes. It was a cycle, a broken generational pattern of obsession and control. And it started long before the Harrows. For 2 days, Olivia didn't sleep. She sat in her motel room, crime scene photos and journal scans pinned to the floral wallpaper, like a serial killer's war room. The air conditioner rattled uselessly. She didn't care. Somewhere between the words scribbled in Elsie's journal and the final pencil mark 1962, Hollister lay the key, not just to the Harrows, but to understanding how a cycle like this stayed hidden for so long. She wasn't just reading evidence anymore. She was walking straight into the shadow of something larger, something stitched together with lies, blood, quiet towns that no one ever thought to search. Hollister was quiet in February. Olive trees stood like skeletons in winter rows. Olivia stopped first at the county hospital, or what remained of it. The new structure was built over the old one in 1994. But the records still existed in the local archive annex, preserved by a miracle of small-town inefficiency. She requested birth logs from 1960 to 1963. There he was, Melvin Lee Clay. Born January 14, 1962, Mother Agnes Clay, listed as farm help, no father. Hospital notes were brief but odd. One nurse's notation read, repeated attempts by uncle to remain in room unsupervised. Mother showed signs of distress. Infant appeared healthy. CPS referral denied by senior staff due to lack of formal evidence. Olivia's stomach turned. The uncle was almost certainly Lawrence Clay. A pattern began to emerge, not one of crimes in motion, but crimes seated in the past. Lawrence never had children, but he raised Melvin like one, except not with warmth, with control. The journals hinted at it, the possessiveness. The phrases like, he was mine to shape, and what I gave him no one could take. There was something more than unhealthy attachment. It bordered on grooming. Melvin's childhood, Olivia realized, wasn't just broken. It was weaponized. She spent the next day cross-referencing every cold case from 1980 to 1995 that involved a couple. Rural roads and vehicles that were never recovered. The Harrows had been assumed to be an anomaly, but as Olivia plotted them out, 7 other cases began to connect. Each couple had taken a route that passed near one of Lawrence or Melvin's known properties, one vanishing in Utah, where Lawrence once worked as a groundskeeper, another outside Gallup, New Mexico, where Melvin had a mobile repair service for a year in the 80s, and one disturbingly similar just outside Mojave in 1986, a couple in their early 60s retired, traveling in a vintage Lincoln, last seen at a gas station. The cashier's report, they were talking to a man in overalls. Big guy, seemed helpful. Never saw him again? That's when Olivia did something bold. She called in favors, reporters she knew, former agents who owed her small debts, and one retired FBI analyst named Delaney from the Phoenix office, who had long suspected a string of serial disappearances across the Southwest, were connected but lacked evidence. Delaney listened in silence as Olivia laid it out. The journals, the vehicle, the locket, the property trail, the names. When she finished, he simply said, "Pack your notes. I'm flying in tomorrow." Together, they returned to the junkyard. One last time, they weren't looking for bones anymore. They were looking for blueprints. And that's when they found it, in the attic crawl space of the junkyard office, taped under a floorboard. A 1974 Rand McNally Road Atlas, pages folded, notes scribbled in margins. One page in particular, the Arizona-New Mexico border region, had a pattern of dots, each labeled with two letters, A, J, M, S, A, L, M, R, psi initials, victims. Delaney opened his laptop and began cross-checking. Within hours, they had matches for 3, Judith Manning, missing 1983, Stephen Alcott, vanished 1985, and Linda Marsh, gone 1981. None of them had ever been linked until now. But what struck Olivia most was one unmarked, near a ghost town named Cresswell, Arizona, circled in red. No initials, no date, just a red circle and the word mine. Cresswell was dead on the map, population 0, a silver mining boom town that dried up before World War II. With no modern road access, just old dirt paths and a few crumbling structures. They drove 6 hours out, stopping where the last gravel road ended. From there, it was a 4-mile hike. The sun was harsh, the land still. But when they arrived, there was more than just ruins. There was a trailer, newer, not lived in, but not abandoned either. It's inside. Canned food, clean bedding, no power, but recent footprints in the dust. And beneath the floor, a trapdoor, padlocked. Laney cut it open. Inside was a narrow passage, cement-lined, cool air, metal stairs, and at the bottom, a room with concrete walls, old floodlights wired to car batteries, hooks in the ceiling, a mattress on the floor, chains rusted into the corners. It wasn't a home, it was a cell. And on the wall, scratched into the concrete with something sharp, Russell Harrow was here. May 28th, 1984. Olivia's heart froze. This wasn't just where Edith had been taken. Russell had been here too, for a while. The next scratches told a story she didn't want to read. Day 3, no food. She's not waking up. He said, this was my fault. Day 7, I think she's dead. And finally, he buried the car. I heard the engine stop. I hope someone finds us. Russell had been alive longer than anyone knew, maybe a week, maybe more. And he'd known the truth, that their car wasn't stolen. It had been hidden, buried deliberately. That meant Melvin didn't just dispose of the car. Made sure it stayed hidden for years until someone like Olivia was forced to stumble across it. Outside, Delaney walked in silence. They didn't speak until they were halfway back to the truck. Then he said, "This was the test site." Olivia nodded, and the others perfected after. What haunted Olivia most wasn't what they'd found, but what was still missing. Melvin Clay was still out there. And if these were just the known stops, how many more were there? Because deep in the pages of Journal 23, tucked in the back pocket of that truck's driver's seat, was one more line no one noticed until days later. I'll return to the junkyard in 2000. Just like he said for the final burial. What did that mean? And why was it in Russell's handwriting? The words haunted Olivia. I'll return to the junkyard in 2000. Just like he said for the final burial. They weren't written in shaky, terrified pen like the other messages on the bunker wall. This line was in neat cursive, dated May 30th, 1984, 2 days after. Russell Harrow's final journal scratch claiming Edith had died. But what disturbed Olivia most wasn't the timeline. It was that someone had written it in Russell's hand. Someone who knew how he wrote. Someone mimicking him, someone planning ahead. Delaney stared at the line for a long time before speaking. "This wasn't Russell, you're sure?" Olivia asked. He nodded. Whoever wrote that had seen his writing. But Russell wouldn't have been that calm, not after watching his wife die in a hole. Olivia felt a chill creep in behind her neck. That meant Melvin had written it. For some reason, he'd wanted it to look like Russell had survived longer than he did, but why? Why fake his voice? Why write about returning to the junkyard if the car was meant to stay buried forever, unless it wasn't about the car at all? Back in town, Olivia made a quiet call to the Mojave County coroner. She asked a simple question. Were there any bodies in the car? The answer, none. The Buick had been empty. The driver's seat was reclined. A coffee thermos sat wedged under the glove box. A newspaper from April 1984 folded on the passenger floor mat. But no bodies. Not even bones. So, if Russell and Edith had both died, where were they? Delaney arranged for ground radar scans around the junkyard. Olivia got access to them within 72 hours. The radar sweep showed something unexpected. Under the back right quadrant of the property, about 10 feet underground, a sealed metal chamber, roughly the size of a shipping container. It hadn't been disturbed in decades. There were no permits, no building records, no reason it should be there. No one, not even the land's prior owners, knew it existed. They got a warrant. And on a gray Thursday morning in late October, a crew began digging. By 3 p.m., they'd uncovered the top edge of a steel lid. Welded shut, coated in years of rust and silt. It took over an hour to open it, and when the floodlights were lowered inside, the smell was immediate, dry, sour, and ancient. They climbed down. Inside, they found 2 wooden coffins, each one carved crudely by hand. No lining, just slats, nailed together. One had the initials RH burned into the top with a soldering iron, the other EH8. But it wasn't just a burial, it was a display. The walls were covered in photograph-sold black and white prints, some from the 50s. Others clearly taken in the 80s, all taped to the metal interior. And in the center, propped up on a steel shelf, a worn, leather-bound book. Journal 24. Olivia opened it. This wasn't Lawrence's handwriting. It wasn't Russell's either. Entries were neat, focused, almost cold in their detail. And on the inside cover, a sentence chilled her spine. This is the history he wanted forgotten. But I remember everything he made me do. MC Melvin Clay. The journal began in 1992, 8 years after the Harrows vanished. The first few pages recounted events Olivia already knew, but told from Melvin's point of view. He said we couldn't leave them in the desert, not this time. We wanted to bury them properly, a gift for their faith. He said their love deserved a tomb. Continued. I built it while he watched. He was sick by then, couldn't help, just pointed. I laid them in carefully. She was already gone. He was barely breathing. He looked up at me and said, "Don't lie about her." Olivia froze. So Russell was alive when they buried him. I gave him water. He drank. He asked for her ring, put it in his hand. He smiled. He said, "Don't bury lies. Bury love." Then he died. It was too much. Delaney lowered his flashlight and rubbed his eyes. They'd been buried together by the killer himself, and yet Melvin hadn't fled. He'd stayed on the property for years. Why? The next journal. Entry answered that too. I couldn't leave. The voices in my head were all his. I didn't know where else to go. Started fixing cars. I kept the ghosts quiet. By the time they emerged, night had fallen. The chamber was sealed again, but now as evidence. The FBI requested full jurisdiction. The bodies were confirmed via dental records. The Harrows' final resting place after 16 years was no longer a mystery. But the story was far from over, because Olivia had one more question. Where had Melvin gone after 2001? She traced his last known residence to an abandoned barn outside Winslow. County records showed utilities were cut off in 2003, no sightings since. But inside that barn, behind a rusted stack of crates, was an old Polaroid photo tacked to the wall. It showed Lawrence Clay standing beside a child. Not just any child, Melvin. The date written on the back, 1967, and the message in Lawrence's writing, "My boy, my legacy." That's when Olivia realized the junkyard wasn't just a hiding place, it was a monument. Not to the Harrows, but to control, to a twisted lineage of manipulation and isolation that started in the 1960s and echoed all the way into the new millennium. And somewhere out there, Melvin Clay, now in his 60s, might still be walking free. Watching, waiting, because buried beneath years of rust, sand, and silence, he had left one more journal unaccounted for. And if Journal 24 was in the crypt, where was Journal 25? The missing journal, Journal 25, wasn't just a loose end. It was a ticking clock. Olivia knew that if Melvin Clay had kept writing, the final volume would contain something Vitola location. A plan, a motive, maybe even a confession. And the fact that it was missing meant he'd either taken it with him or left it. Somewhere on purpose. The morning after the burial site discovery, Olivia returned alone to the junkyard. The FBI had sealed off the entire area, but she still had credentials and clearance and something gnawing at her gut. She stood in the skeletal remains of the old office shack, where a bullet-ridden calendar still hung crooked on the wall. June 1984. She closed her eyes and imagined Melvin standing. In this room, hands blackened with grease, hearing those voices again. What was he hiding? Then she noticed something on the underside of the desk, just beneath the drawer rail. Her fingers brushed something rough. She ducked underneath. It was duct tape, layers of it, discolored with age, and hidden behind it a small, flat leather case. She pried it out and opened it slowly. Inside were two things: a silver locket with an old black and white photo of a woman, not Edith, and a folded envelope marked Journal 25, my ending. Her hands trembled. The journal wasn't long, no more than 40 pages, but each entry was denser, more fevered, more confessional than any before it. The first few pages were rambling, Melvin's guilt about his father, Lawrence, and how he'd been raised more like a pawn than a son. Then things turned darker. They think I killed them, but they don't know about the others. Olivia froze. Others. He made me clean up after him. Each town, each trail. The Harrows weren't the first. They were just the first who stayed together. She flipped to the next page, heart hammering. There were 8 before them, all told, mostly women, runaways, a few travelers. He'd lure them in with kindness. I'd fix the scene, suddenly. The empty field surrounding the junkyard didn't seem so empty. He said the Buick needed to stay perfect. Untouched by blood, he told me. That's why we used the well. After he died, I tried to forget. But forgetting doesn't work when you sleep in his grave? Olivia blinked. The well? There had been a capped well behind the junkyard, overgrown and fenced off. Authorities hadn't thought much of it. But now, she called Delaney immediately. By afternoon, a second dig crew arrived. He cleared the brush and peeled off the rusted metal lid. Inside was a vertical shaft, about 25 feet deep. A camera probe was lowered, and what they saw turned Olivia's stomach. At the bottom were bones, too many to count at first. They sent for forensic archaeologists. As the daylight faded, they pulled up the first skull, then another, then 3 more. Some were tiny, likely from young women. Some had evidence of blunt trauma, others tool marks on the ribs. Over the next 72 hours, 14 sets of remains were recovered from the well. One of them had a necklace, a small silver cross, the exact one. Worn by a waitress who'd gone missing in New Mexico in 1981, she was never connected to the Harrow case until now. The media dubbed it the Mojave Well Massacre. The FBI released a nationwide appeal to help identify the victims. Several were confirmed through missing persons databases. Others remained Jane Does, but the discovery of the well did more than solve cold cases. It shifted everything. It proved Lawrence Clay had been a serial killer for decades. And Melvin Clay, his son, had been his cleaner and possibly more, because the last line in Journal 25 read, "One day I'll take someone and see how it feels." Not because he told me, but because now I want to. By the end of 2001, Olivia was promoted to Regional Special Investigator. Delaney stayed on as liaison with the cold case team. But the case still had one gaping hole. Where was Melvin Clay? They put out composite sketches, age-progressed images, checked hospitals, bus stations, border logs, nothing. Then, in early 2002, a woman in Leach, Texas, reported something strange. Her elderly tenant had moved out abruptly, leaving behind a drawer full of old car keys, 2 disposable cameras, and a storage receipt from a facility 10 miles outside town. Authorities obtained a warrant. What they found inside that unit stunned everyone. It wasn't filled with weapons or maps. It was filled with models, miniatures, dioramas meticulously hand-built of junkyards. Trailers, motel rooms, even a replica of the Harrow's Buick, complete with bloodless seats. Each one labeled with dates and notes. Test 1, 1972. Practice scene, March 1980. Burial chamber, September 1992. And at the back of the unit, resting beneath a sheet, was the largest model of all. A replica of the well with 14 tiny plastic skeletons inside. Olivia didn't sleep for 2 days after seeing it. Because Melvin hadn't just cleaned up his father's crimes. He'd turned them into art. But even that wasn't the final horror. When the forensic team developed the 2 disposable cameras left behind, one photo showed a blurry highway exit. The other showed a man, maybe in his late 60s, standing behind a gas pump. Half his face turned away, holding a newspaper. The timestamp. October 31st, 2001, 3 weeks after the junkyard discovery. And the headline on the newspaper, "Burial bunker revealed, Harrow remains found." Olivia stared at the photo, heart pounding. Melvin had seen the coverage. He'd been watching, and he knew he was being hunted. The photo was grainy, but the man had one unmistakable detail: a stitched leather wristband. The exact kind worn by Melvin Clay in an old 1985 DMV photo. He had survived, he had escaped, and now he knew they knew everything. The manhunt widened. Olivia spoke at press conferences. Clay's face was posted on post offices, police boards, and highway signs across the Southwest. But by 2003, the trail ran cold again. Melvin Clay had vanished, just like his father once tried to make the Harrows disappear. Only difference. Melvin was smarter and perhaps more dangerous, because where Lawrence had killed for control, Melvin seemed to kill for meaning, and meaning never ran out. The search for Melvin Clay had officially escalated to a federal priority case. 3 FBI field offices were now involved. Olivia headed the cross-regional task force, codenamed Broken Odometer. The name came from one of Melvin's model dioramas. A small detail on the Buick replica: its odometer frozen at 178,341 miles, exact mileage of the Harrow's car when it was found. To most, that meant nothing. But to Olivia and her team, it felt like a clue, a breadcrumb from someone who wanted to be found, but on his own terms. Because Melvin didn't just disappear, curated his silence. Back in California, a retired FBI analyst named Harold Nunez, nearly blind but still sharp as ever, reached out to Olivia. He'd been following the case and had a theory. He asked for copies of all Melvin's known journal entries. Within days, he noticed something no one else had. "There's a rhythm here," Harold said, running his fingers across the braille-like ridges of printed pages. Every 7th entry starts with a past event. Every 14th with a location, and every 21st he paused. Every 21st journal entry is a lie. He pointed to one from Journal 12 that said, "I never buried anyone east of Nevada." But victim remains had already been found east of Nevada, which meant Melvin wasn't just writing to confess. He was coding, leaving trails for those capable of reading them. With Harold's insight, Olivia mapped every known journal. The pattern revealed a subtle but undeniable shift in 1994, the year Melvin officially inherited the junkyard after his father's death. From that point on, every 4th entry referenced reflection, broken glass, or mirrors. She cross-referenced that against missing persons reports. That led her to something odd. In 1996, a woman named Camila Grace vanished while backpacking solo through southern Arizona. Her last journal entry, found in a ranger station locker, mentioned a strange man at the rest stop near Mirror Rock. Said he used to fix cars. Told me I looked like someone he lost once. Mira Rock was a local landmark, a sheer granite wall in the Sonoran Desert known for its odd reflections during sunrise. It was also only 20 miles from an abandoned repair station. Olivia ordered a team there immediately. They arrived to find a crumbling building, sun-bleached tools still hanging from the walls. The entire property felt paused in time. In the back room, half buried under a tarp and rusted shelving, they found a metal trunk. Inside was a red satchel, and inside the satchel, Journal 29. This one was unlike the others. No numbered pages. No timestamps, just a title for the one who finally saw me. Olivia read the first line aloud. I think I'm getting better at disappearing. Each time I leave a place behind, I make it quieter, cleaner, more like me. The final page was a list 8 names. 6 of them were confirmed missing persons. All young women. 1 was Camila Grace. The 7th was scribbled out. The 8th, Olivia Wilcox, her own name. The breath left her body. Oh well. Melvin had anticipated her. Not just that she'd find the journals, but that she'd decode them. He had built this story like a maze, one only she could walk through. And now, she wasn't sure who was hunting whom. Back in D.C., the team combed through public databases to find links between Olivia and Melvin. Then a breakthrough, in 1984. Melvin's mother had been institutionalized for a brief period in Seattle under a different surname, Lucille Rains. In her intake paperwork, she listed her next of kin as the baby girl she gave up in Kansas in 1971, a daughter born 3 years before Olivia. The adoption records were sealed, but one signature matched Melvin's alias. He'd forged it. Implication was devastating. Melvin might have believed Olivia was his half-sister, and that's why he'd watched her casework for years. Why he left models behind for her. Why she was the one who finally saw him. The emotional toll hit like a freight train. Olivia stepped back from the case for 5 days, took long walks, reread her own family records. Her mother never mentioned a sibling, never spoke of a past in Kansas, but a DNA test confirmed it. She and Melvin shared 35% of their DNA, enough to suggest a half-sibling relationship. Suddenly, the story had changed. This wasn't just a monster leaving breadcrumbs. This was someone who believed he was connected to her, maybe even saving her from something. When she returned to work, Olivia focused not on tracking his path, but on understanding his mind. Why the models? Why the need for perfection? Why bury people but stage their absence as art? Psych profiles suggested a fractured psyche. Someone who needed to control every narrative, who hid the real crime beneath a cleaner illusion. And then came a tip. A gas station owner in Utah had found an envelope taped to the back of an air pump. It contained a photo of a model car junkyard and a single phrase. Some wrong turns aren't wrong at all. The handwriting matched Melvin's. The station was less than 200 miles from a state park where 2 sisters vanished in 1986, a cold case never tied to the Clays until now. The FBI dispatched drones to scan nearby arid terrain. In 48 hours, they spotted something beneath a rock shelf, a metal hatch with heat-resistant bolts. Ground teams uncovered a trapdoor leading to a hidden crawl space. Inside, 3 mannequin-like bodies dressed in period clothes, arranged in dining poses, around a metal table. Candles melted into the rusted edges. On the wall was painted, "The family I built." Each mannequin wore a tag: Edith Harrow, Lawrence Clay, Melvin Clay. Only the last one had no head. The silence in the control tent was palpable. Delaney whispered, "Is this a memorial?" "No," Olivia said. "It's a threat." Because beneath the table was a final model, a replica of a car junkyard. And at the center, a model of her own childhood home. The meaning was clear. Melvin wasn't running anymore. He was planning something. And Olivia had just become the centerpiece of his final act. The air inside the FBI's main operations room felt tighter than usual. Screens glowed, maps layered with decades of pins and timelines, but all eyes kept circling back to one item: Olivia's childhood home, rendered as a miniature model found beneath the dining table shrine. Every agent in that room understood what it meant. This was no longer a cold case. This was personal. 2 days after the discovery of the hidden crawlspace shrine, forensic teams confirmed the mannequins weren't human. Synthetic frames, taxidermy grade, detailing, and molded facial features designed to resemble photos of the Harrows and Melvin Clay. The lack of real bodies was no relief. In fact, it made the message clearer. He was rewriting the narrative. For years they assumed Melvin buried the truth under soil and rust. But now it was evident he was crafting his own mythology. The real graves were likely elsewhere. This was performance, a directed message. Olivia sat with it longer than anyone else. He doesn't just want to be found, she finally said. He wants to be remembered the way he frames it. So what? Delaney asked. An artist? As an author, Olivia replied quietly, of everyone's story but his own. The team reviewed the replica of Olivia's childhood home in detail. The placement of items was eerily accurate, a rusted birdbath on the right. The back porch with the squeaky railing, the hedge maze her father once trimmed. There was even a mailbox with the number 4187, their real house number. But the mailbox door was slightly open, and inside it, a curled note printed in tiny typeface. Where it started is where it must end. A new pin was added to the board. Eugene, Oregon.Olivia, flew out the next morning. Flanked by a small task force, not uniformed agents, just analysts and archivists she trusted. The Clay family had no recorded ties to Oregon, but Melvin's mother, Lucille, had once spent time at a psychiatric facility nearby in 1970, months before giving birth. Could that be where it all began? When they arrived, they found the house. Long sold, turned into a Montessori school, but the grounds were mostly unchanged. In a patch of overgrown ivy behind the garage, they unearthed something, a waterproof time capsule box. Inside, Polaroids, dozens of them. Some were random landscapes. Others road signs, but 3 stood out. One was a snapshot of Melvin's father at a junkyard in Texas. 1978. Another was a blurry picture of Edith and Russell Harrow outside a motel, taken from behind a curtain, clearly not meant to be seen. In the third, a photograph of a small girl, maybe 5, riding a tricycle, written on the back in neat blue pen. You deserved more time. Olivia's hands trembled. That girl was her. She recognized the front steps, the pink overalls, the missing tooth smile.
Ow.
This wasn't just about obsession. Melvin had been watching her since she was a child. But how? The answer came from an unexpected place. The maintenance manager at the old psychiatric facility, now converted into a hotel, recognized a photo of Melvin. He had an old ledger, long forgotten, in a utility closet. And on April 2nd, 1971, a man named M. Clay signed in as a visiting relative of Lucille Raines. The same day, a newborn baby girl was temporarily placed in state custody. No adoption record survived, but Olivia knew now. Melvin had seen her in that hospital, watched her vanish into another family's life, and carried that fracture with him for decades. Meanwhile, in a storage unit Melvin rented under the alias Frank Bishop, agents found a full diorama of the Harrow's last known route. Each stop had been marked with pins and small figurines. Even their car was recreated in shocking detail. But one addition didn't match: a barn, red slanted roof, surrounded by sunflowers. No such location had been reported on the couple's journey, and yet next to the model was a note. All roads lead here if you're brave enough to look. Satellite analysis and 1980s property records revealed something chilling. A farm 20 miles off the Harrow's intended path. It's privately owned by a man named Clyde Rowan until his death in 1989. Had a barn identical to the one in the model. Property had never been searched in the Harrow investigation. The team moved quickly. What they found inside the decaying barn stunned even the most seasoned agents. In the farthest stall, beneath rotted hay and collapsed wood beams, at a car, a 1982 Buick Electra, sun-bleached but intact. Doors rusted shut, windows caked in dust, license plate still faintly readable, H8391. The Harrow's car, Todd. Olivia stepped forward. The car was sealed, but unlike what they'd imagined, it wasn't destroyed or mangled. It was staged. Inside, on the dashboard, a model replica of the car itself, same color, same license plate. On the back seat, 2 passenger mannequins dressed, like the Harrows, hands resting in their laps.
Ow.
It was like they'd been frozen in a silent road trip. But something was missing. No blood, no signs of trauma, no DNA, and taped to the steering wheel, a note. This is where the map ends. The barn was treated as an active crime scene. Olivia walked out, away from the noise and forensics chatter, and sat under the rusted sunflower windmill outside. She stared at the horizon. For the first time in her entire career, she didn't know if justice meant finding a body or understanding why someone would build this lie so intricately. She had one final journal left unopened, Journal 31, and she'd been saving it. Now she opened it under that red sky. First page, if you're reading this, then you found the car, but they weren't in it. Olivia turned the pages slowly, each one thin and yellowed with time. Journal 31 wasn't like the others. Wasn't filled with numbers or coded maps or haunting poetry like Melvin's earlier writings. It was a confession of sorts, a quiet unraveling. I didn't plan it this way, he wrote. But once I saw them that day, smiling, holding hands, checking the map, I couldn't help myself. They reminded me of what I never had, what my mother destroyed, what the system gave away. He hadn't known them, not really, but he'd followed them for miles through gas stations, through back roads, watching. I only meant to talk to them, ask them what love like that felt like. But something went wrong. A confrontation. He hinted. Fear, struggle. I told them to get in the car. They did, but I didn't know what to do after. I kept driving. The journal didn't say where he took them, only that he panicked, that their voices were kind even when afraid, and that one night when they were asleep, he made a choice. I couldn't keep them, couldn't return them, couldn't erase them either, so I hid them. It's not just their bodies, but the idea of them. Olivia stared at the final lines for a long time. Some people kill out of anger. I killed because I thought I was rewriting something broken. But I only copied the pain. There were no burial locations given, no coordinates, no real closure. But the car, the one in the barn, had been another replica. The real car, they later discovered, had been crushed and sent to a junkyard 3 towns over in 1999. Reassembled later in the barn to complete Melvin's exhibit. All that remained of Edith and Russell Harrow were faint bone fragments and fabric pieces, found in a dried-up irrigation trench behind the Rowan farm. Uncovered only after a full dig was ordered. 16 years of wondering had ended, but not neatly. Olivia stood quietly at the small funeral held by surviving relatives. No press, no headlines, just closure, or something like it. 6 months later, Olivia cleaned out her apartment. She was retiring. There had been too many cases, too many ghosts. But this one had changed her, not just because of Melvin's obsession, not just because of the meticulous misdirection, but because of how much had been hidden in plain sight. Many years people ignored the missing, chalked up the strange. To coincidence, she left one note for her replacement: don't chase the killer, chase the pattern. That's where the truth hides. As for Melvin Clay, he was never found. Some believe he's long dead. Others think he's still watching, rewriting someone else's story right now, 'cause people like him don't stop, they just vanish, like the ones they take.